Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and today we have a sci-fi subgenre showdown between cyberpunk, dystopian, and zombies. Recently I read When Gravity Fails, High Rise, and The Girl with All the Gifts, and I'm going to be letting you know which of these I think you should read and which one came out on top. So let's get started with our cyberpunk book, When Gravity Fails by George Alec Effinger. This book is set near the end of the 22nd century, where a killer roams the streets of the Budayin, and a freelance operator named Rid Audrin is forced to investigate these murders. Recently, some of the cyberpunk that I've been reading has felt more cyberpunk adjacent, and I've been craving some classic cyberpunk. When Gravity Fails delivers on this with some body modification technology, a gritty atmosphere, and some grimy characters. The book uses certain tropes, but still feels original because of the impressive world building. The Middle Eastern setting provides an interesting environment through which to explore the integration of humans and technology. Effinger also does a good job of using local customs, religion, and philosophy to inform the characters and the story. The city feels alive with this host of characters which are all fighting for money and power and have their own motivations for either forming alliances or committing betrayals. One of the strengths of the book is Marid as a character. He's arguably a morally grey character, but one with black and white worldviews. He has strong opinions and perspectives, and it's quite rewarding to see him engage with the world through these particular lenses, especially when these opinions and perspectives of his are challenged. The cybernetic tech featured in the book is pretty cool. For example, there are things called addies, which are add-ons through which you can upload various skills into your brain. There are also moddies, which when uploaded, you can take on an entire personality. For example, I could take on the personality of Frank Sinatra or Michael Jordan or anyone else that you can think of that can be programmed and uploaded. As a crime story, I think it works fairly well. There is a genuine tension as Marid tries to navigate the dangers of the city, as well as trying to track down the killer. The pacing of the central plot does slow down a little bit at times, and it's not the most intricately written in terms of all of the twists and turns, but I did always find it engaging and I was enjoying myself while reading the story. Thematically, I think this book touches on some interesting concepts, but there wasn't anything that I had a strong reaction to emotionally. I think I was more entertained by the technology and the characters than I was big ideas. In terms of the writing style, I found the prose to be quite readable and enjoyable. If you are looking to get into classic cyberpunk, this might be a slightly more accessible option than Neuromancer. And in regard to the content, this book prominently features drugs, sex, and violence, but not in a way that felt gratuitous to me. It felt true to the nature of this underground world and the tone of the crime story, as opposed to anything over the top for the sake of shock value. Overall, I enjoyed my time reading this book. If you are in the mood for cyberpunk, I think there's a good chance this one could be a hit. I gave When Gravity Fails an 8 out of 10. Moving on to Dystopian, we have High Rise by J.G. Ballard. In this book, around 2,000 people live in a luxury high-rise building, but as minor power failures start to occur and small grievances arise, factions start to form and violence ensues. The opening of this book does a good job of describing the type of people that live in this high-rise. The curated style, the projection of status, and the transactional nature of their relationships. The higher the level on which you reside, the more prestigious, and this creates a hierarchical society within the building, and this feels ripe for some social commentary. And in the book, things spiral out of control pretty quickly, but in a way that didn't feel entirely real to me. The reactions in this book felt entirely disproportionate in a way that I don't think accurately reflects human behavior. And perhaps this was the point. Ballard may have been exaggerating this in order to highlight the pettiness and the perverseness of our psyche that we might not be really willing to admit to ourselves. But I did start to wonder, to what end? Because when every character is so cruel and violent to such an extreme degree, it's kind of hard to intellectually engage with the text when the only perspective shared or presented is that humanity is entirely irredeemable. And this just wasn't that interesting to me thematically because it felt rather shallow. It also became a bit of a slog to get through because there wasn't any real clear plot objectives. It was just page after page of violence and assault, and that started to become extremely repetitive. There was also an unusual amount of harm done to animals in this book, and that was uncomfortable to read. And the depiction of these types of content aren't as graphic in this book as they are in others like Altered Carbon or Vert, which I enjoyed, but in those books, the violence serves to develop the world, inform the characters, and heighten the stakes. In High Rise, I struggled to find any connections that would enable these violent scenes to serve as any significant character or plot developments, or lead to ultimately any payoff. And as a result of this, it just kind of came across as edgy, empty shock value. The world building in High Rise was also a little bit lacking for me. The High Rise seems to exist in a vacuum from a non-specified near-future world, and I think a better understanding of this world would have helped illuminate some of the decisions being made inside the High Rise. And I understand that the isolation of the High Rise is a commentary on being disconnected from the world, but I feel like if we knew a little bit more about what we were being disconnected from, it may have enabled us to better explore the meaning of that disconnection. The only positive things that I can think to say are that I enjoyed the setup in the first 40 pages, and that Ballard has a tremendous command over the English language. It can be a bit of a dense read, but Ballard is undeniably evocative with his words. If you're looking for a bleak, nihilistic book on the literary end of the spectrum, then you might get more out of this than I did. But ultimately, this isn't really my kind of science fiction. I gave High Rise a 4 out of 10. And finally, our zombie book, The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. The Girl with All the Gifts is set during a zombie apocalypse, and it follows several character perspectives, but the main character is a young girl named Melanie. Exploring this world through Melanie's eyes, especially towards the beginning of this book, was a fantastic reading experience because of the unique perspective that she provides and the emotions she elicits. I actually enjoyed Melanie so much as a character that I was rather annoyed when I would finish one of her chapters and had to move on to a different character. The other characters felt 2D, but not 3D to me. They were a little tropey at times, and when Carey attempts to subvert some of these tropes later in the novel, it didn't quite feel earned to me because I don't think he quite laid enough groundwork in terms of the character depth. I thought the pacing of the book flowed well, and it is very readable. Although the plot did feel a little bit familiar, if you've read zombie books or watched zombie movies, I think that some of the beats here are going to feel routine. I typically think of zombie stories as belonging to the horror genre, although there is some overlap with science fiction. I did like in this book that there was an attempt at some sort of scientific explanation for the zombies, and while this definitely isn't hard sci-fi, the approach of providing scientific problems and then offering scientific solutions is a style of sci-fi writing that I enjoy. Now, a weird quirk in the writing that I have to point out is that several times Carey wrote lines such as, "They closed the door and they were safe, but they weren't," or "She was alone, except she wasn't." I understand that this is being done to catch the reader off guard, let us have a moment of reprieve, and then up the tension again. But when you think about what's really happening, it's just the narrator lying to us and then immediately correcting that line. And this just really took me out of the story because I felt the presence of the author. And I'm actually kind of surprised that an editor let Carey get away with this about 5 or 6 times. Anyway, this all culminated in an ending that I was a little mixed on. I'm not sure I ever fully bought into it, but I did appreciate that it was somewhat of a big swing and felt a little bit different from other zombie stories that I've read or watched. Overall, I found this to be quite an enjoyable and easy read, and would describe it as good, not great, except for Melanie, who was a great character. In the end, I gave The Girl with All the Gifts a 7 out of 10. So there you go, no 5-star reads unfortunately, but I did enjoy 2 of these 3 books, with When Gravity Fails coming out on top, scoring a point on behalf of Team Cyberpunk. Let me know if you've read any of these books and which was your favorite in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash, or just gently click, the subscribe button, and if you really enjoyed it, consider checking out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs, like Nima and New Eden, Half-Ogre, Zakawe, Sumil, and Colin, who unsubscribed. Except he didn't. And you can find more sci-fi content over here.